Incident number 1. On June 14, 2015, in Austin, Texas, USA, wedding guests began arriving at an outdoor venue beside a quiet river as preparations continued calmly. The bride, Emily Carter, was inside a nearby cabin adjusting her dress while her family moved between tables setting decorations. The ceremony area had been built close to the water to create a scenic backdrop for photographs and vows. Earlier that morning, heavy rain upstream had caused the river level to rise slightly, but no warnings were issued to the wedding party. Guests gathered along the riverbank as music played softly, unaware the ground beneath them was becoming unstable. As the groom, Daniel Carter, took his place at the front, the riverbank suddenly gave way without warning. Several guests fell directly into the fast-moving water, disappearing beneath the surface within seconds. Screams erupted as people rushed backward, slipping on wet grass while trying to understand what had happened. Emily ran from the cabin toward the river, seeing her father and younger cousins struggling in the current. The water pulled them downstream as they fought to stay above the surface, their movements becoming slower. Daniel entered the river in an attempt to help but was knocked off balance by debris carried by the current. Emergency services were called immediately, but rescue crews struggled to reach the victims due to the water speed. Emily's father lost consciousness first, disappearing beneath the surface as the current carried him away. Her cousin was pulled out minutes later but showed no signs of breathing despite repeated attempts to revive him. Paramedics pronounced both victims dead at the scene from drowning and blunt force injuries. The ceremony site was closed off as investigators documented erosion damage along the riverbank. The wedding was canceled permanently, leaving decorations and chairs untouched beside the water. What had been planned as a celebration of marriage ended as a fatal reminder of how quickly joy can collapse. Incident number 2. On August 12, 2018, in Lyon, France, the wedding hall buzzed with excitement as guests arrived for the reception. Bride Claire Moreau adjusted her dress inside the bridal suite, while groom Julien Dubois welcomed friends at the entrance. The banquet tables were lined with platters of food, champagne glasses sparkling under soft lights. A small, unnoticed vial of poison had been placed in the appetizer tray by a disgruntled former colleague. Guests began eating, laughing, and toasting the couple, unaware of the danger in their meal. Within minutes, Claire started coughing violently, her face turning pale as she clutched her throat. Her uncle Henri collapsed onto the table beside her, knocking over dishes in a sudden panic. Chaos erupted as guests screamed, running toward exits while some vomited violently from the poisoned food. Emergency responders were called, but several people had already collapsed unconscious on the banquet floor. Some tried CPR on the victims while others clutched their heads, paralyzed by terror. Claire's cousin Antoine began convulsing, his movements wild and uncontrolled, drawing gasps from those around him. Julien grabbed Claire, trying to comfort her, but soon felt the effects of the poison himself. Within 20 minutes, 8 guests were dead, and others critically ill, the room filled with smoke of fear and panic. Investigators later traced the source of the poison back to the former colleague who had left unnoticed. The wedding hall, once a scene of joy, was now a grim crime scene with overturned chairs and ruined decorations. Families were left in disbelief, mourning their loved ones in a day meant for celebration. The reception was permanently canceled, decorations abandoned, and the hall remained sealed for investigation. What was supposed to be a day of love and joy had turned into a massacre, leaving an indelible scar on the community. Incident number 3. On July 4, 2021, in Santa Monica, California, the beach wedding of Emma Reynolds and Liam Carter was in full swing under the bright afternoon sun. Guests sipped cocktails while children played near the shoreline, laughter mixing with the distant sound of waves. A local pyrotechnics technician had been hired to launch fireworks as part of the celebration. Everything appeared under control until a gust of wind caused one firework to misfire toward the seated guests. Emma noticed sparks falling dangerously close to the tablecloths and shouted a warning, but it was too late. The first firework exploded on contact with a decorative umbrella, sending flames and debris into the crowd. Panic spread instantly as guests scrambled to escape, some tripping over beach chairs and table legs. Sparks landed on dry towels and decorations, igniting small fires that quickly spread across the sandy reception area. Liam grabbed a bucket of water, trying to douse the flames, but his path was blocked by panicked guests. Several guests suffered severe burns as the sparks touched exposed skin, screaming in terror. The beach sand offered little protection as the fire spread to the decorations around the food tables. A young girl named Sophie tripped in the chaos, landing face down near a small bonfire decoration. Emma tried to pull her away, but another misfired firework struck close to her, knocking her to the sand. Within minutes, 5 guests suffered critical burns, and 2 were declared dead on the scene. Emergency services arrived, struggling to navigate the chaotic beach and scattered debris. The technician who set up the fireworks was unharmed but horrified, unable to stop the unfolding disaster. Families were left mourning on the sand, some holding blankets over injured relatives as helicopters circled above. The beach, once decorated for love and celebration, had transformed into a scene of horror, its memory forever burned into those who survived. Incident number 4. On June 19, 2017, atop Mount Fuji in Japan, a wedding ceremony was underway for Yumi Tanaka and Hiroshi Sato. The couple exchanged vows as a light drizzle began, unnoticed in the excitement of the moment. Guests clustered under a simple tent, while others lingered outside to capture photos against the scenic vista. Suddenly, a flash of lightning struck a nearby metal railing, sending a shockwave through the gathering. Hiroshi instinctively pushed Yumi behind him, but the energy arced across the wet ground. Guests screamed as the electricity found paths through metal jewelry and umbrellas, shocking multiple people. The bride's uncle, Kenji, collapsed immediately, struck directly by the discharge. 2 children holding balloons were thrown backward, their expressions frozen in terror. Paramedics were called from a nearby station, racing up the mountain trail as rain intensified. Several guests suffered burns on their arms and faces, convulsing on the wet rocks. Hiroshi and Yumi held each other tightly, both terrified and unsure if anyone around them would survive. A photographer named Satoshi collapsed next to the ceremony table, camera still in hand. The wedding tent partially melted under residual sparks, adding to the chaos. Emergency crews reached the top, trying to separate the injured and stabilize those still conscious. By the time help arrived fully, 3 guests had died, and several others were critically injured. The ceremony was abandoned, decorations drenched and scattered across the rocky peak. Families huddled together under tarps, mourning those lost in what was meant to be a joyful union. The mountain wedding, celebrated for its beauty, became a tragic scene forever remembered for the lethal storm. Incident number 5. On September 12, 2019, in Florence, Italy, the wedding of Isabella Rossi and Marco De Luca was being held in a historic villa. The sun was shining over the terrace, and guests were leaning on the balcony, railing to enjoy the city view. Children ran around excitedly, chasing each other while holding bouquets of flowers. Without warning, a large section of the wooden balcony gave way under the weight of the gathered crowd. Guests screamed as they plunged toward the cobblestone courtyard below, unable to grab hold of anything. Isabella clutched Marco's hand, but the force of the collapse separated them instantly. A photographer, Luca, was trapped under splintered wooden beams, unable to move or call for help. Several older guests landed awkwardly, their legs and arms bent unnaturally from the fall. Panicked relatives tried to pull people free from the wreckage, some crying as they realized the severity. The courtyard quickly turned into a chaotic scene of blood, broken wood, and scattered wedding decorations. By the time emergency crews arrived, 4 people were confirmed dead, including a young aunt of the bride. Injured guests were being transported on stretchers to nearby ambulances, some screaming from pain. Marco tried to find Isabella, his expression one of terror and disbelief. The villa staff stood frozen, horrified by the sudden collapse that destroyed part of the historic terrace. Relatives called for anyone still conscious to move away from the unstable balcony remains. Survivors tried to console each other, some holding blankets over minor injuries as rain lightly began. Isabella was located alive but badly injured, carried to safety by 2 groomsmen. The villa's balcony, meant for celebration and photo moments, had become a scene of horror in seconds, forever remembered by all present. Incident number 6. On November 3, 2020, in Dubai, UAE, the lavish wedding of Aisha Al-Habib and Omar Khalid was underway at a high-rise hotel. Guests wore elegant attire and chatted excitedly as they prepared to ascend to the rooftop terrace for the reception. The elevator was crowded, filled beyond its recommended capacity with family and friends. Suddenly, a loud grinding noise filled the elevator as the doors closed completely. The cable snapped without warning, sending the cabin plummeting multiple floors. Aisha screamed, clutching Omar's arm, her wedding dress flowing around her in the rapid descent. Guests were thrown violently against the walls and each other, many sustaining severe injuries instantly. The sound of metal twisting and cables snapping echoed through the building as the shaft amplified the chaos. The bride's younger sister, Layla, hit her head on the wall and fell unconscious immediately. Paramedics were alerted, but the emergency system struggled to reach the scene quickly due to the building's height. By the time rescuers reached the elevator, 5 people were already dead, including 2 children of guests. Survivors were dazed, covered in blood, with broken bones and bruises from the violent fall. Aisha clung to Omar, both conscious but unable to move due to injuries. The elevator cabin was mangled beyond recognition, metal twisted and wires hanging dangerously. Witnesses on the upper floors peered down in horror, unable to assist from the shaft. Hotel staff tried to calm other guests, but panic spread quickly throughout the building. Emergency crews carefully removed the injured from the elevator and transported them to local hospitals. The Dubai wedding, intended to celebrate love and unity, became a tragic reminder of mechanical failure and human fragility.